Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to imagine this for a second. You are standing outside, right? And a brutal, just suffocating heat wave has completely scorched the country.
Oh, yeah. The kind of heat that leaves literally everything looking defeated.
Exactly. Even down in the roadside ditches, you look at the ground elder, which, by the way, is arguably the most stubborn weed north of the Alps.
Right. The one medieval monks brought all over Europe because you just can't kill it.
Yeah. But even that indestructible weed is drooping lifelessly in the shade.
Which tells you something really critical about the environment. I
Huh?
mean, when ground elder is giving up and it's not even in direct sunlight, the entire local ecosystem is in a severe water stress crisis.
It really is. And we're actually looking at this crisis today through the incredibly observant eyes of Kesser and Steen. They are two 11-year-old boys from a nature and innovation class.
Really sharp kids.
Very sharp. So they're out patrolling their neighborhood, right?
Hmm.
And the weather suddenly flips from this extreme drought to a massive torrential downpour.
A total shock to the system.
Right. And a few days after the rain, the boys walk to these specific spots in their town, and they find exactly what they were looking for. Powdery mildew, just exploding all over the foliage.
And see, they knew exactly where to look because they actually understand how plants behave
Yeah.
in these critical situations.
Yeah.
Like, you could have a team of university biologists spend years mapping out the complex genetic life cycles of powdery mildew.
And there are a lot of strains out there.
So many strains. But these two 11-year-olds, they just approached the whole problem from a totally different angle.
They completely bypassed the biology textbooks and went straight to Kesser's grandmother.
I love this part.
Yeah, his Oma has this beautifully simple gardening philosophy. She says, the mildew on your leaves is just a symptom. It is never the root cause of your garden's problem.
Right. And taking that wisdom, Kesser developed this really fascinating framework. Because, we usually think of fungal diseases as these invading armies, right? Like they're trying to conquer the garden.
Yeah, malicious attackers.
Exactly. But he proposed that powdery mildew isn't an attacking force at all. It's actually a street sweeper.
A street sweeper. I just love that metaphor. A street sweeper isn't trying to destroy the city. It's just showing up to clean up the trash.
Yeah, in this case, the weak, limp, vulnerable plants that have already totally surrendered to the heat wave.
So the fungus is really just an opportunistic cleaner.
That's exactly it. It targets leaves that literally lack the internal resources to defend themselves.
When you look at it that way, the whole modern gardening obsession with nuking fungal diseases from orbit, it just seems totally backward.
Oh, completely.
We spot a white spot on a zucchini leaf, and we immediately reach for the chemical fungicide. It's basically like putting a bucket under a leaky roof, emptying the bucket every afternoon, and congratulating yourself on your home maintenance.
While completely ignoring the giant hole in the ceiling.
Right, but, okay, let me push back for just a second. Because we all have busy lives, right? Isn't it just practically easier to spray the fungicide than to play a plant psychologist and figure out what the zucchini is failing?
Well, it feels easier in the moment. But Steen's field notes point out the long-term logical flaw there. You can't eradicate an omnipresent fungal spore from the outdoors.
Right. The street sweeper is always driving around the neighborhood.
Always. So the only way to keep it out of your yard is to remove the conditions that invite it in. Kesser summarized it perfectly, honestly. He just said, healthy plants aren't sick.
Healthy plants aren't sick. It's almost deceptively simple.
Yeah.
And they also notice that the mildew almost always attacks the plant's new shoots. Like the plant is desperately trying to push out new growth after the rain, but it doesn't have the internal armor to protect its softest parts.
Which means we have to look at the internal machinery of the plant.
Yeah.
What is actually missing.
And Kesser suspects he knows the culprit behind this systemic weakness. He points his finger straight at element number 19 on the periodic table.
Potassium.
Atomic symbol K. If you dig back into high school biology, you might remember sodium-potassium pumps in human cells.
Oh, yeah.
They manage the electrical charges that regulate our heart rhythms, fire our nerve impulses, all of that.
Right, and you find a really similar crucial mechanism in botanical life.
Okay.
Potassium is essentially the logistical engine of a plant.
Okay.
It manages the transfer of food, it enhances the greenness of the leaves, and most importantly for keeping our street sweeper away, it regulates the plant's structural integrity and immune system.
Which brings us to, honestly, one of the most painfully funny observations from their project. Steen's new raised beds for his
Oh,
strawberries.
the strawberry disaster.
Total disaster. He planted them, they grew, they looked incredibly green and lush, but he still faced a complete harvest failure.
And it was purely due to a mechanical issue governed by potassium.
Exactly. So inside a strawberry plant, potassium acts as this physiological pump. It drives water into the plant's cells, creating what biologists call turgor pressure.
Right, that internal water pressure.
Yeah, and that pressure physically elongates the cells. For a strawberry, that cellular elongation is what builds a tall, sturdy stem that pushes the actual berry up into the air away from the dirt.
But when the plant is starved of optimal potassium, I mean, it might still produce green leaves. It might not look yellow or sick,
Right.
but it just cannot generate enough turgor pressure to build that tall stem. So the cells stay short and flat.
And the berry just rests sadly in the mud.
Yep.
Which creates a very convenient all-you-can-eat buffet for the local snails. I mean, Steen essentially built a Michelin star restaurant for garden pests.
He really did. And, the snails didn't attack because they're evil. They attacked because the plant's structural engineering failed. And this exposes a really harsh reality of agriculture, a concept we can think of as the debit and credit reality. Potassium is a base element. A plant cannot just manufacture it out of sunlight and water.
Right, you can't just wish element 19 into existence.
No, it can only absorb it from the soil. So your soil is basically a bank account. Every single time you harvest a perfectly organic, beautiful strawberry or like a head of lettuce, you're making a withdrawal.
You're permanently removing potassium from that plot of land.
Exactly.
But wait, if I'm just making withdrawals by picking veggies, why can't I just make the deposit using the traditional natural method? Like, I throw my banana peels and coffee grounds in the compost, spread that black gold over my garden, and boom, the bank account is replenished.
Well, sure. For a backyard raised bed, composting is a fantastic way to replenish the account. You can grow dynamic accumulator plants like comfrey, chop them up, use them as mulch.
Right.
But you have to step back and look at the macro level of global agriculture. We are feeding 8 billion people on this planet.
Yeah, that's a lot of mouths.
You simply do not have enough discarded banana peels to fertilize millions of acres of commercial farmland. The mathematical scale of the withdrawals vastly outpaces those natural localized deposits.
Which totally explains why human beings had to invent commercial NPK fertilizers. Like, you walk into any garden center and you see those bags with the 3 numbers stamped on the front.
Right, representing nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the big 3.
Nitrogen for leafy green growth, phosphorus for root and flower development, and potassium, as we now know, for structural and immune support.
Yep.
And in that garden center, you'll see these chemically produced salts, things like potassium nitrate, labeled 13044, or liquid potassium lawn food, which is 0025.
Those artificial salts, they are incredibly effective at forcing a plant to stand up quickly. You apply liquid potassium, the plant gets this instant spike of nutrients, and it builds that strawberry stem.
And this is a big, but pouring liquid salts on your soil is essentially taking out a payday loan to fix your garden's bank account.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. It provides immediate cash, but the long-term ecosystem cost is just brutal. Manufacturing those concentrated salts requires burning massive amounts of energy. And because they're highly soluble liquids, they don't even stay in the soil.
No, they don't.
The very next time it rains, a huge percentage of that fertilizer washes right past the roots and pollutes the local groundwater.
Furthermore, treating farming purely as this, mathematical input-output system, it leads to ridiculous extremes. Kesser and Steen's notes highlight the danger of just sitting at a desk staring at an agricultural spreadsheet.
Oh, the gummy bear pigs.
Yes.
This is such a brilliant critique of industrial farming. So if a farm manager is only looking at caloric math and carbohydrate requirements on a screen, they might realize that pigs will get perfectly fat if you feed them massive quantities of discarded factory reject gummy bears.
Because the numbers balance perfectly on the spreadsheet. A calorie is a calorie to a spreadsheet.
Right, but gummy bear fed pork is absolutely not the label consumers want to see at the grocery store.
Definitely not.
People want natural origins and holistic health, but at the same time, they demand a scale of massive global production that makes those natural origins almost impossible.
And this tension between natural balance and massive scale, it actually brings up a severe geographical vulnerability. We have a fundamental mismatch on the globe regarding where we grow our food versus where we get our fertilizer.
Just how bad is this mismatch?
Well, consider the equator. Many of the world's most heavily potassium-dependent crops, like commercial bananas, are grown in the southern hemisphere. Brazil and India are agricultural powerhouses.
Absolutely.
But the raw material we mine to create potassium fertilizer, which is known as potash, is overwhelmingly located up in the northern hemisphere. Brazil relies on imports for 90% of its potassium, and India, 100% dependent on imports.
Wait, I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
Because if Brazil has the Amazon rainforest, which is arguably the most lush, densely packed ecosystem on the planet, how is their national soil totally devoid of element 19?
I know, it seems super counterintuitive. But tropical rainforest soils are actually incredibly nutrient poor.
Really?
Yeah. Millions of years of heavy, constant rainfall have leached the soluble minerals deep down into the earth, way beyond the reach of normal plant roots.
Oh, wow.
In a thriving rainforest, all the available potassium is locked up in the living biomass. The trees, the vines, the rotting leaves on the surface. So when humans clear that forest to plant commercial soybeans or bananas, they remove the biomass.
And the bank account in the bare soil is completely empty.
Exactly. So they have to ship in millions of tons of concentrated salt from the other side of the planet just to keep the street sweeper fungus away.
That is wild.
It's a huge vulnerability. And it's exactly why MIT researchers started looking for an alternative. Steen actually found their research using AI search tools.
Very impressive for an 11-year-old.
Seriously. But the MIT team asked a crucial question. Is there a source of potassium locked inside rocks that are geographically closer to the global south?
And they actually found it in a very common ore called feldspar, right?
Yeah, feldspar is everywhere. The problem is the potassium inside it is locked in this tough, silicate crystal matrix. You can't just grind up a boulder, sprinkle the dust on a banana plantation, and expect the plants to eat it.
The rock just won't surrender the element.
Right. So the MIT scientists engineered this fascinating chemical process. They take finely ground feldspar and apply a targeted alkaline treatment.
I look really closely at how this works, and it's brilliant. The alkaline solution, it basically chemically attacks the silica matrix of the rock. It etches away specific parts of the crystal structure without melting the entire thing down.
And it does all this while generating zero waste, which is the holy grail for industrial processing.
Totally.
They transform this raw feldspar into a brand new, highly porous compound they call hydrocyanide.
And the physical structure of that hydrocyanide is the real breakthrough here, because that alkaline etching process, it leaves the rock with this microscopic, water-rich, popcorn-like texture.
Yes, the popcorn texture.
And that changes everything about how we feed the soil. Because if liquid potassium salts are, like we said, a volatile payday loan that washes away in the rain, this MIT popcorn rock is like setting up a long-term trust fund for your garden.
That's a perfect analogy.
The potassium is trapped deep inside those tiny water-rich pores. So when you mix it into the dirt, it doesn't just dissolve all at once. It releases the potassium slowly and naturally.
Matching the exact speed at which the plant's roots actually evolve to absorb it.
Right.
It perfectly mimics the natural degradation of minerals in a healthy soil biome. It's such an elegant solution to the runoff problem. But, it forces us to ask a much larger question.
Okay, what's that?
If the world's agricultural superpowers are going to all this trouble to chemically etch feldspar in a laboratory, where is all the natural, easy-to-access potassium coming from today? Like, who is hoarding it?
Well, for that, you have to look to the north, specifically the Canadian province of Saskatchewan, which sits on this ancient continental crust known as the Canadian Shield.
Yeah, Saskatchewan is a geological behemoth. They're the world's second largest producer of potash. The industry generates annual revenues well over $5 billion.
$5 billion a year, essentially just digging up salt.
Because the global demand is completely insatiable. Human populations are surging, and the demand for meat in rapidly developing nations, that requires growing oceans of corn and wheat just to feed the livestock.
Right, the gummy bear pigs.
Exactly. Global potash demand spiked 83% from 1970 to 2012, hitting 63 million tons a year. It is such a vital strategic asset that China's largest state-owned fertilizer producer literally invested heavily in a Vancouver-based company just to lock down a guaranteed 20-year supply line.
So the modern world is utterly dependent on Canadian dirt to survive. But why is it all buried under Saskatchewan?
Well, for that, we have to travel back in geological time. Roughly 400 million years ago, the geography of the Earth was completely unrecognizable.
Right.
The landmass that makes up modern-day Canada was not located near the Arctic Circle. It sat much closer to the equator.
So it was this massive, baking tropical landscape.
A literal tropical oven. And huge portions of that continental crust were submerged beneath a vast, shallow inland sea.
Like a giant continent-sized bathtub sitting directly under the equatorial sun.
Exactly. Now, ocean water naturally contains massive amounts of dissolved minerals, including potassium, which have been washing off the rocky continents for eons.
Okay.
And this particular inland sea was partially isolated from the open ocean by these colossal natural barriers, sort of similar to giant coral reefs.
So the ocean water could slowly spill over the reefs into the basin, but then it was trapped.
Yes, the only way the water could escape the bathtub was through evaporation.
This is where we need to picture, like, stirring sugar into a glass of iced tea. If you leave a glass of heavily sweetened, salty water out in the baking sun, the water eventually turns to vapor and disappears.
But the solids are left behind.
Right.
Crucially, though, they don't all solidify at the exact same time. Different salts have different tolerances for water. So as that inland sea evaporated over millions of years, the least soluble minerals crashed out of the water first, settling on the bottom.
But potassium is highly soluble. It loves water. It clings to it desperately.
So it stubbornly held on to those shrinking puddles of water until the bitter end. It waited until the absolute last drops of the inland sea were evaporating before it finally crystallized.
Whoa.
And because of this extreme solubility, the potassium formed incredibly pure, highly concentrated layers right on the very top of the dried out seabed.
And then the Earth's crust did what it always does. It shifted. Over subsequent geological eras, those pristine layers of ancient sea salt were buried kilometers underground beneath millions of tons of new sedimentary rock.
A massive geological vault.
Yeah. That heavy rock acted as an impenetrable vault, protecting the highly soluble potassium from being washed away by millions of years of rain, glaciers, rivers, all of it.
Which creates, honestly, one of the most stark visual contrasts in modern industry. Like, if you visit a potash mine in Saskatchewan today, the surface operations are incredibly grim.
Oh, it's the absolute pinnacle of heavy industrial scarring. You drive through these flat agricultural fields and suddenly you hit these gigantic gray factory complexes.
Towering, square concrete pillars jabbing into the sky.
Yeah, you see massive steel buildings with corrugated roofs, endless rows of white silos, and just miles of freight trains waiting to be loaded.
And the surrounding landscape is dominated by these artificial catchment lakes filled with this toxic-looking light blue or grayish wastewater.
But if you catch a glimpse of the conveyor belts emerging from the earth, you see this raw, reddish pink and brown rock. That's the raw potassium salt before it undergoes chemical purification.
But that is just the surface. If you drop 1 kilometer straight down an elevator shaft, you enter a completely alien environment.
You step out into these endless, cavernous salt mines. The subterranean walls are beautifully striped with alternating bands of stark white and raw reddish pink salt. You are literally walking through the dried remains of a 400-million-year-old ocean.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And they use these massive robotic boring machines to grind away those ancient stripes, hauling millions of tons of it to the surface to be processed, bagged, and shipped across the ocean.
To Brazil, India, and, well, your local garden center.
Yep.
Which means, and I just need to process the scale of this for a second, when I notice my houseplant looking a little yellow and I buy a cardboard box of commercial plant food and I sprinkle a teaspoon of it onto the potting soil, I'm essentially feeding my houseplant the evaporated ghosts of a 400-million-year-old tropical ocean.
You are tapping into the concentrated solar energy and deep geological time of the Paleozoic era, just to keep a Kathos green.
That is wild.
The entire global agricultural supply chain is running on the fumes of an ancient buried sea.
That is deeply unsettling, but also kind of magnificent. And honestly, it brings this entire journey full circle back to Kesser and Steen in just the most poetic way possible.
Because the 11-year-olds figured out a way to bypass the ancient ocean entirely.
They realized they don't need a massive gray factory complex in Saskatchewan or a fleet of freight trains or a multi-billion-dollar international supply chain just to keep the street sweeper away from their strawberry stems.
They understand the local debit and credit reality of their own environment.
Exactly. According to their project notes, when they need to make a deposit into their garden's bank account, they just get on their bicycles and ride down to the local beach.
And they spend an afternoon collecting kelp.
Yeah, seaweed that has just washed ashore.
Because kelp meal is one of nature's most perfect, slow-release sources of potassium and essential trace micronutrients. It operates just like that MIT popcorn rock, releasing elements exactly as the soil needs them.
So, by simply walking down to the shoreline and picking up seaweed, Kesser and Steen are skipping over 400 million years of continental drift, geological evaporation, massive industrial mining, and the toxic runoff of liquid payday loans.
They are completely bypassing the gummy bear spreadsheets and returning to nature's original balance system. They close the loop.
They really did. They took a localized problem powdery mildew cleaning up a heat-stressed weed, and they solved the underlying structural issue of the plant without unbalancing the broader environment.
It is an absolute masterclass in observation.
It fundamentally changes how you look at a garden. So, the next time you walk outside after a heat wave and you see powdery mildew acting as a street sweeper on a limp leaf, or you catch a snail throwing a dinner party on a strawberry that didn't have the turgor pressure to stand up.
Don't just reach for the chemical fungicide.
Right. Think about your soil's hidden bank account. Think about element 19.
Consider the long-term health of the system, rather than the quick fix of a chemical salt.
And as you do, it leaves you with a fairly massive question to ponder. We have built our entire fragile global food system on the back of billions of dollars of heavy machinery, relentlessly mining a finite layer of dried up sea salt that formed 400 million years ago. What exactly happens to the global food supply when we finally hit the bottom of that ancient ocean?